Hey there, it is Melanie back with another Heavy Metallurgy review. Happy New Year. This is my first review of 2024, and we're starting off with some heat here. The new Spectral Voice album, Sparagmos, out on Dark Descent Records, February 9th. This is probably one of the most anticipated death metal albums to be announced in several years now. I think so many people for years now have been like, when is a new Spectral Voice album coming out? When is there going to be new music released? When? Their last album, Eroded Corridors of Unbeing, came out in 2017 on Dark Descent, has been hailed as one of the, modern classic death metal bands, like iconic death metal band and albums. People really hold it up on a high pedestal. So it's finally here. I think it's starting off 2024 very, very strong for death metal after what was a very good year last year. So let's get into it. So again, this is coming out February 9th. If you're not familiar with this band, they have members of Blood Incantation and Black Curse. Don't worry, people, if you are deterred by the word Blood Incantation, this band sounds absolutely nothing like their albums. This is very much a side band, another project that they do with a much different style of death metal. It is 4 tracks coming in at 44, just a little bit over 44 minutes long. Yes, so there are longer tracks on this album, ranging between 11 to 12 minutes. So right out the gate, they're doing something a little bit different from their previous album. And like I said, their previous album has been considered one of the modern masterpieces to come out. In my opinion, I would give it a perfect 10 out of 10. It's dark, it's crushing, it's suffocating, death doom, just perfect gutturals. It has various, those various tempos that it goes back and forth between crushing and fast, and then the slower death doom sound. So that album is spectacular. If you've never heard it, go listen to it. So let's get into the new album. So like I said, it's 4 tracks long, and right from the minute the first song starts, I noticed immediately that it was a lot different than their last album. They've definitely enhanced and changed their sound. They've progressed their songwriting, and they've added elements into these tracks that are a lot different than their last album. Their old sound is still very much there. That death doom sound that they have created from their previous album is still very much here. They haven't deterred too far away from that, but they've also added a little bit more vocal intricacies and tempo changes and even funeral doom sounds into this album. I was pretty taken back by that, I'm not gonna lie, and it took me several listens to really digest and fully grasp what I was listening to for this album. I was not expecting that at all. Their first album clicked with me immediately. It's one of those things that I've pulled off my shelf and I've listened to several times since it came out in 2017. It has been a frequent spin of mine, to the point of where I have, I think, like 3 different copies of it. So I was not expecting this, but change is not always necessarily bad, and I'm very much a person that appreciates when a band progresses their sound and adds things into their music that is different from what they've, past released. When stuff sounds the same album after album, I get bored. So I like when they do that transition and that change. So let's go into the track by track discussion here. The first song, Be Cadaver. It's 6 minutes in is when the pace really starts to pick up. So this is a very slow burn song. It's an 11 minutes 52 second song. And it's a slow burn in the very beginning. It is, like I said, not until about 6 minutes in is when the pace really starts to pick up. And then this vocal style comes in, and it's a very raspy scream. I was not expecting that. They definitely had a little bit of a vocal variance on their last album, where it would be kind of like a high scream, or like almost like a screaming chant, but it was very few and far in between, not as frequent. This vocal style is heavily present in this album now. It is not just the deep gutturals that you would expect for a death doom band. They incorporate this almost like blackened, high-pitched, raspy scream. It's a very dark and suffocating song. It starts out, like I said, very slow, very doomy, and at times felt a little bit funeral doom-esque here and there. The shrill screams are so evil and sinister, though. And it's, like I said, it's a new vocal variation that you do not hear on their previous album. Especially within their previous songs, like they've released an EP last year, or a split, I should say, with Undergang. And even this sounds different from what they've released on that. The deep growls that we are so used to hearing on their last album are definitely here. Those deep gutturals are definitely in this song. But all around, it's got a very dark and doomy sound until the end of the track, where these guitars come in and there's almost like a choral like singing in the distance. It's got a very intricate ambience to it. They've added layers. It's not just a straightforward death doom song where it's just slow, crushing slow. It's slow with variations of vocal styles and guitars, and then heavy that almost sounds a little bit blackened, black metal influenced at times. The song very much reminded me of a blackened Bellwitch song. When Bellwitch is getting into their up tempos of their songs, where they finally have the slow burn is finally going away, it's going into that more of that crushing chaos that they tend to do. That's what this song kind of reminded me of. So right out the gate, you're hearing a lot of differences with this album from their past album, and it's not bad. I would just say I was a little bit taken back by that when I first heard this song. Going into the second song, Red Feast Condensed into One, I believe this was the single that came out when the album was announced. And this is a more ferocious and heavy start to a song, which made me happy because, again, those slow burns can tend to be a little bit tough to get into, especially when you're not into the mood for it. It's faster pace, deep growls, much of what you would expect to hear from this band, especially from their last efforts that they put out. But this only lasts for about 50 seconds, and then it goes back into that slower death doom tempo. It's sluggish and it's crushing. Eventually the shrill screams start to come back, so that different vocal variants that they've added in here. And it almost feels a little bit funeral doomy with this song. The tempo really starts to dig in around 3 minutes, though, so it does have those peaks and valleys with this song. I do absolutely love the riff that starts around 9 minutes and 30 seconds. It's followed by this absolutely maniacal screaming that's just very evil sounding. Not something that I was, expecting to hear. It just kind of was like, wow, okay, that just happened. This only really lasts for about a minute. And then once again, it goes into that slower tempo with that crushing breakdown and these filthy screams. So another song on here that has so many different variations. There's so much going on that just really, if you're not paying attention, you miss things. It's definitely warranted to be listening to with headphones on, which is not something I do very often. I like to spin my records on my stereo or listen on my cassette deck or CD player, but this is definitely an album that is warranted to at least have a couple listens on headphones so you can hear all the different things that are going on within this music. The next track, Sen Sensor, I think is how you say that. More of that sinister funeral death doomy sound on here. The guitars have like this really darkened sound that kick off this song. It goes into a faster paced tempo that is, very in your face and dark eventually. Has a very suffocating and dissonant sound with those deep guttural vocals, which is what I absolutely love about Spectral Voice and many of these other death doom dissonant death doom bands. Like, this song as a whole ended up being what I was really wanting to hear for this album, and ended up being my favorite song on this album. It does go back to a slower, like doomier sound within 2 minutes. However, this one is not as dragging as other songs. Again, it's the shorter song on the album. It's only 7 minutes and 40 seconds long. Shorter song. Hey, compared to the other ones, it's shorter. But it really is a spectacular song. This was the shining highlight for this album for me. It definitely felt like I was listening to a mix of Vastum, Ascended Dead, and even Black Curse, which Black Curse is very much a sound that has been incorporated into this album, which makes sense because there are members of that band in here. But this is, like I said, the death metal that I absolutely love when bands do this style of death metal. And this is, again, the shining moment on this album for me. Yeah, definitely my favorite track. Then we go into the final track of the album, Death's Knell Rings in Eternity. This is a 12 minute 50-second long song. Man, talking is hard. This is more of that slower, suffocating tempo that starts out the track. The beginning of the song just sounds like it's going to be the end of the world. And that's very much what this song has made me feel like. It is just creepy sounding and sinister and evil, and like literally we are being destroyed with this song. It is not something that you listen to and it makes you feel happy, that's for sure. The drums are a standout for sure on this song. It absolutely just pristine drumming on this, and it's definitely a highlight. Another song that has those peaks and valleys where it goes in between tempo changes and goes back and forth between slow and then the crushing and pulverizing and devastating sound. The vocals also go back and forth on here. There's not a one path vocal style. It goes back and forth between the shrill throaty screams and the deep gutturals. There are just moments on this song that just feel like utter chaos of just crushing screaming. They'd only last for a few seconds long, but it's definitely one of the moments on this song where you just don't expect it, and here it comes, and that starts around 5 minutes. That is definitely a new style that they've incorporated into their music. That I, again, after several listens, I finally it really clicked with me. I was like, that sounds awesome. This is so crushing and so good. But again, this song sounds like a horror movie. It just sounds like a sci-fi horror movie where we're just the world is coming to an end. After this song literally destroys your ears for 12 minutes, it does fade out into a void, and that is how the album ends. So this album is a lot. I will not lie. It is definitely a crushing, a dark and evil, dissonant sounding album. It is not something that I would feel is very digestible within the first listen. If you're looking for the more straightforward death doom that you're used to hearing that Spectral Voice does, you're not getting that with this album. They have written more intricate and more and added more styles into their songs. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. They definitely progress their sound, and you can tell that they don't want to rewrite the same thing over and over again. So my final thoughts on this are the band has expanded and progressed their sound, like I just said. The writing is by far more superior on this album. The production sounds amazing. The mix is very, very good. Nothing overshadows anything. The vocals are very prominent, and like I said, the drumming on that final track is spectacular. They have incorporated so much more intricacies into their songs. like I've said several times already. And again, there's that funeral doom sound that I was not expecting. And that took me a minute to really get used to on here. But I've really, really enjoyed it after, I just digested it. It's a slower paced tempos that are still here from their first album, but they definitely, I feel like, incorporated them more so than their first album. But there's just a lot of elements that have been put into every song with the different vocal styles and the shifting tempos and just the overall background sounds of what I'm assuming they probably use synths and ambience for there. But again, it's a very well produced and very well written album. I do like it a lot. I do think that it is going to be a shining moment of 2024. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy this and they're going to give it a very high praise. For me, though, I will be honest and say that I don't know if I like it more than their first album. The re-listenability of this album might not be as frequent as it, like I said, it takes a moment to digest. It's something that is very much a mood album for me personally. However, you may feel differently. But just wanted to call that out. It's not all happy rainbows at all. This is a very somber and just really kind of depressing sounding album, which, Death Doom is not happy whatsoever. So those are my thoughts on this album. I think it's starting 2024 off strong with death metal. Spectral Voice is a phenomenal band, phenomenal musicians, and they wrote a very good album. I think it's going to really shock a lot of people with this sound, but I also think that a lot of people are really going to give this high praise. That is all that I have today. Happy New Year. I'm happy to be back. I'm excited for this year. And I just want to say the last thing that I want to shout out here is that Slime Lord, awesome band, just released a single on 20 Bucks Spin as well. Check that out. Really looking forward. That is another one of my highly anticipated albums to come out this year. I will see you guys in the next one.